Welcome to Rhythm, Bass, and Place, Remembrance, and Kinship through the Lens Virtual Curatorial Talk. Today's program is part of CCCADI's 5-month series celebrating the circulations and migration of Black music in social spaces, entitled Rhythm, Bass, and Place, Connections and Reflections on Music of the African Diaspora. My name is Sabine Blazin. I am the Director of Programs here at CCCADI. Our mission is dedicated to advancing cultural equity, racial and social justice for African descendant communities through arts, culture, education, and media. CCCADI's work is critical to empowering our communities, and I invite you to support our 45 plus year legacy by making a gift of any amount today. Our strength is in our numbers and our solidarity to one another. So, no matter how small or large your contribution, know that you're making a lasting impact. Simply click the donate button at cccadi.org. Thank you very much. Now I would like to hand it over to Lynnée Denise, our amazing curator for our Rhythm, Bass, and Play series, who will moderate today's conversation and introduce our guest panelists.
Thank you, Sabine. Thank you so much. Again, my name is DJ Lynnée Denise, and I am honored that CCCADI chose me to curate this epic music series, Rhythm, Bass, and Place. And as part of it, we have put together an amazing exhibition with Joe Conzo Jr. and Malik Cumbo. Um, Let me maybe introduce the context for the exhibition before introducing the artist so that we can have more context entering this conversation. The American political and social climate of the 1970s spawned a musical movement. The dismantling of social programs lit a fire under the creativity of Black and Brown youth across New York City boroughs. There are stories that live between rhythm, imagination, and innovation out of hardship, and yet trauma is not the engine. Artists have found a way to mark this era through a series of interrelated cultural practices, breakdancing, scratching, rhyming, and painting, which ultimately was a kind of manufacturing of joy. Photography serves as a compass into these lively worlds. This photographic exploration mirrors what it means to be a selector at the decks, painting a story with each song, even if the song is an image. For the exhibition, CCCADI has procured images and I selected images that represent a combined history of over 50 years of visual storytelling for New York's music culture. While Joe Conzo Jr.'s work captures the Afro-Latin contributions and signatures to multiple genres of music from disco to house to hip hop, Malik Yusef Cumbo's work captures the 90s and 2000s element of New York hip hop and artists who have left a mark on what could be called the New York City underground street culture. By placing these photographers in the same exhibition, CCCADI seeks to inspire questions about the usefulness of a visual archive of the city's musical and cultural history. I want to share their bios because those bios are massive, but I'm only going to share an excerpt. Please do visit the cccadi.org website and look for the exhibition page to look at the more extensive bio because together these combined bios, require, I think, a New York Hollywood star, if you would. I'm going to start with Joe Conzo Jr. The New York Times heralded Joe Conzo Jr. as the quote, man who took hip hop's baby pictures. The long imperialist journey of his photographic images had finally captured the gaze of mainstream America. Born and raised in the Bronx, Mr. Conzo acquired a passion for photography as a young boy attending the Agnes Russell School on the campus of Columbia University. He continued his formal artistic education at the School of Visual Arts, NYC. He also received certification as a combat medic. Later, he would join the New York Fire Department as an emergency medical technician. It was his role as an EMT that delivered him to the World Trade Center on the morning of September 11, 2001, 2001. And let me just say, welcome. Thank you for being here, Joe. This is a massive way to kind of put a period on this, bio, is to know that you are still here and that you witnessed so many things from September 11th to what could be a kind of birth of hip hop. Malik Yusef Cumbo is a photographer, artist, filmmaker, and a producer. His first love is the art of photography, and his first creative influence was his mother, Fakisha Cumbo, a great photojournalist. He would study her photographs of Bob Marley and Peter Tosh, amongst many other music makers. And he made portraits of her when she needed one for publicity after his mother got him a summer job with a local photographer named Larry Brown as Brown's film and print processor. Malik fell in love with the craft. So, welcome to both of you. Welcome, welcome, welcome. And yes, how are you all feeling today?
Yes, thank you very much. I'm honored to be a part of the whole process and the whole exhibition, everything. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you all for being here. You know, I'm sure you didn't consider the fact that we would be celebrating hip hop's 50th year, right? In 2023, when you first picked up your cameras and, were either witnesses of this emergent cultural sort of sonic blast that was happening in the Bronx in particular, all the way to what it became in the 90s and the 2000s, right? So you guys are in this 50-year conversation as photographers together, and I am not sure that that is an element of hip hop or any other musical genre that we spend enough time in, right? The witnesses and the photographers that documented the beginning of a musical movement. So, what does it feel for you two to be experiencing this kind of duo exhibition, capturing hip hop and all the other genres that are connected to it in New York City? We can start with you, Joe.
For me, it's a humbling experience. I like to see myself as a documentator of what was happening, what's going on, and what will happen. Um, it's been a wonderful ride these past 50 plus years, so to speak. For me, it's 40 plus years in photographing, but to be introduced to Malik's work, and is just phenomenal, 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 and like bringing us together with the same passion that we both shared, and our parents introducing us to the world of photography, as my stepfather was an amateur photographer, is just, and we both went to the same college, School of Visual Arts, which is amazing too. But I'm just humbled and just so happy that this happened.
Yes, for me, it's funny because how I picked up the camera was actually my father. My father was a real estate adjuster, and he took pictures with camera. So he always took pictures of the family and everything. So my original way I saw pictures was photographs that he took of my mother with fisheye lenses and stuff. But my mom was the one who really shot a lot. So a lot of her stuff was of music, of Bob Marley and Peter Tosh and James Brown and Kool and the Gang and all that stuff. So I saw her documenting history and music. And I always thought that was really cool. And so when my father gave me the camera, I didn't even know that I was documenting history. Tell you the truth, I was just being a part of what was happening, and then I'm just looking around and I'm like, oh, that's a good shot. Oh, that's a good shot. Oh, and tell you the truth, sometimes, as you know, this show brought back a lot of images that I hadn't even looked at for years because I was just documenting. So one a lot of times with photographers, they don't really get a chance to, when they're continually going to really inspect all the negatives and stuff like, because when you have a contact sheet, back then you had to look at it through a loop, so you don't really know. There you go. You don't really know, all the time, the shots that you really have, like the shot of Biggie and Snoop, I didn't even really know, that I had that shot for a long time until I really started to say, you know what, I'm just going to start printing stuff. And then when I found that one, and I was like, oh wow, this is crazy, but the music was the thing that got me out there, so it was like, we was going to music parties and meeting people and so forth. And that's, a part of the way that sort of things propagated back then. It's like you didn't really, have the digital era where you're just reaching out. You just went out and met people. So that was it, man. Just hanging out and, using my talent where I could, fit in, So that's how it was for me as far as
Okay, I love all the overlap and the interrelatedness between you all. But so here's something that's interesting, right? Like I spend a lot of time with both of your images, and making the selections for. Well, I know that Malik, you figured out what photos you wanted to submit, but then we all sort of like sat with those photos. And here is an interesting, I guess, another like sort of overlapping connection for you all is just the roles of your family. And I just want to pause because Malik, you're saying your mom was a photojournalist, your father was a photographer who captured your mother, but then also your sister Lori Gumbo, right? I mean, I think that this is a massively talented, family,
Family.
right? As a whole. However, Joe, hold on now. You have you actually have you captured a number of images of you with your family or your family, right? I'm not sure that they necessarily made it to this particular exhibition, but in going through your work, I noticed that you documented your family, right? So
I'm a descendant of activism. My family played a huge role in changing the inequities of the Bronx in New York City back in the 70s and 80s. My grandmother um, was affectionately known as the Hell Lady of the Bronx, Dr. Evelyn Antonetti. She was instrumental in starting bilingual education in the public school system and so forth and so on. My mother, Lorraine Montenegro, started the first drug rehab for women with children in the country. And my dad, Joe Conzo Jr., is known as the foremost historian on Latin music, who today is Tito Puente's 100th birthday. Happy birthday to Tito Puente. May he rest in peace. But, so when I wasn't hanging out with the hip hop pioneers that built this culture, who I went to school with, I was hanging on my dad's coattail, taking pictures of Tito Puente, Celia Cruz, all these iconic Latin musicians. And when I wasn't with my dad, I was taking pictures of, being dragged to demonstrations by my grandmother and my family, protesting the movies Fort Apache the Bronx, going to Washington, D.C., demonstrating against this, against that. And so, I come from a very revolutionary family, so to speak. And I just happen to be that chubby little kid with the Angela Davis afro documenting my surroundings. And I fell in love with photography at an early age. Um, it gave me an outlet to communicate because, I wasn't athletic. I wasn't, an MC or a DJ or dancer, but I was the only kid in the neighborhood with a camera. And then my parents, my mother especially, supported my passion and allowed me to build a dark room, and the rest is history. The rest is history.
Girl, it's so funny that you're saying all that because it harmonizes with a lot that that I dealt with. Like my mom was an activist. She was in Eyes on the Prize as one of the teachers that was in the documentary. I went to a school named Weisi Shule, and it's very interesting because I forgot a major dynamic within the. There was a woman named Amenisha Black Weusi, right? She was Jitu Weisi's ex-wife, and she did a newspaper in the neighborhood for small neighborhood news and Black struggle issues and so forth. But one of the things that she did was she would teach us how to process our film and and do all that processing and so forth. And that was a very key factor. It's very important that we have small little programs, neighborhood things where people are giving back, because without that little plug, because it's little plugs here and there, right? That add up. And without that little plug, I don't know if I would have been feeling the wave and the pushing me toward that direction. And then so things fell in place. My father gave me the camera, and then my mom did a show on. It's now called Brick, but it's back then it was a BCAT for 30 years, called Case International, and it stands for Creative Artist Cultural Exchange, where she interviewed various types of people from various types of creatives, from writers, actors, singers, politicians, whatever type of creative being that had something creative to say. And then she would show their artwork and so forth. So I got a chance to meet a lot of people and photograph, like Pharoah Sanders, that's in the exhibition.
Don't forget.
I didn't forget, Joe. I didn't forget. And various people like that, and that allowed me to be amongst that energy. I mean, when I was really young, I got a chance to meet Bob Marley and Peter Tosh, and so I was amongst that
The
energy
greats.
from a very young age. So once I was around Rakim, I was able to feel like, okay, cool. I can be here and present. So I think all of that helped me to be comfortable in the situations that I was in, to be able to, allow myself to guide myself through the shoots. I want this, I need this from you, such and such, So but yeah, how we harmonize is amazing, because without those early starts, like my sister's, she started a museum and, went on into to politics, and now she's, the commissioner of the arts, of New York City. So those early implementations of families, very important.
So many things. I'm so excited. Let me hold on. Where do I even start with you all? So first of all, shout out to Makata, right? Museum that Laurie started, and shout out to the fact that they made sure that Greg Tate has this huge mural on the wall, right, in Brooklyn. But also, I remember when Makata first opened, we were all excited and we were going there for exhibitions and openings. And so that's amazing. You guys both come from this kind of like royal blood. So shout out to your genes. I'm truly, truly royal. Okay. Activism, right? Royal blood, I think. And what we mean by activism also is cultural production, right? So that you two end up becoming activists, whether you identify with being so or not. But look at, in this conversation, the range of ideas we've already explored before even getting into the details of your photography, right? That we've already talked about a number of, genres of music, or sort of like political moments, whether it's the kind of like, anti-Hollywood, anti-Apache moment in the Bronx, whether we're talking about the death of Biggie Smalls, whether we're talking about Snoop going to jail with Tupac and them being acquitted, right? There's so many histories and so many layers and textures in your photography. But believe it or not, I want to pause at something that Malik said and bring an interesting villain, I'm identifying him as such, into this conversation, and that is Ronald Reagan. Right. So I have like, he's a villain. He's a Hollywood cowboy who took that, cowboy mentality into his policy making world, right? But I say that for two. We have a question for Joe, and then a question or maybe a comment for Malik. And that question is, Joe, like, were you around, or do you remember hearing about when Reagan came to the Bronx?
So
Well, let me ask Malik the question too, because Malik said something that made me think of Reagan, which was that, like, key to his development as a photographer was having these programs, right, where you can learn how to, you know, create dark rooms and process film and all of those things. But Reagan comes in and slashes many of those programs, right? So I'm curious about if you were able to see the dismantling of those social programs, and if you think it had an effect on photography. So that's one question. And then for Joe, I'll take us back. Do you remember when Reagan came, and just any other sort of reflection on Reagan, because it has so much to do.
I'm gonna shed light and share. So yes, Reaganomics is going on. School programs are getting slashed up the wazoo, everywhere, music, the whole nine yards. But it's places like my grandmother's organization, United Bronx Parents, that saw this and developed photography programs for kids where I honed my skills at. Even though I had a darkroom at home, thank you to moms, it was programs like my grandmother's program, United Bronx Parents, that saw the need to do music programs, photography programs, dance programs to get the kids off the street after school, because these after school programs were being cut during Reaganomics, and give a place where the kids can go, A, be safe, B, get some good food, and C, learn a trade, learn a hobby, learn something. So shout out to all the community-based organizations back then and up until today. So I have an image in the exhibition of Charlotte Street with the big 3-story Puerto Rican flag hanging down. And that was actually during a protest when Reagan came to the Bronx to visit. So yes, I was there when Reagan came, looking for votes, making empty promises to the people of the Bronx. And that was during the time where it was 1979, 1980. The Democratic National Convention was going on at Madison Square Garden at the time. And Reagan's trying to disrupt all of that by coming as a Republican to secure votes. And is this the second time a president came to the Bronx seeking support? Jimmy Carter came a few years earlier doing the same thing. So yes, we demonstrated, we protested, we were like deja vu all over again. You want our support, but what are you going to do? And it's sad to say that, when he got elected, he implemented a lot of his Hollywood John Wayne tactics of cutting and my way or the highway type politics. So yeah.
My experience, I personally was, I don't know if I would say lucky, but my mom, I guess, growing up in the East community, where I went to school, Waisi Shule, so Mama Amanisha was a part of that whole community. Her family helped, set that up. So I was lucky to be a part of, cooperative economics kind of, situation where we had our own schools and so forth, so, there was a Rusasa, Waisi Shule, and a couple other different schools that I know a lot of people who came out of that school. So I was lucky to have been in that community. So a lot of my early jobs, my very first job was working in Baba Jitu Weusi's store that he had on Fulton Street. It was a food co-op, and so that was really my first job. Well, technically my first job was selling incense on the corner, but that's a different story. But but that was technically my first job, so I was able to get a understanding of a work ethic type of thing. And then during the during the African street festivals. I would work the stage, and this is all before I got into photography. So it was teaching a sort of early discipline kind of thing. So I was lucky that they had their own programs and their own installed sort of creative economic kind of structure where I was able to go to her program because I was in the community, and being a part of a community like that helps to guard against, well, I won't say fully guard against, because while other programs were being cut, I still had the opportunities, so I didn't feel that effect of Reaganomics as much on that level. I saw it around me as far as how like the streets were going and how, the effect of, Reaganomics was taking toll. So I wasn't necessarily guarded against it, but I was shielded against it sort of like as opportunity. So when I was able to, to get her program, and then once I hit high school, because I was in junior high school, and then once I hit high school, then I took, the photography class, and then Larry Brown came into play. Then I came to be his apprentice. And then so that was my route into getting into photography, besides watching my mom, doing her stuff. So I didn't feel it as far as that goes. And then there was a summer program at Pratt that I would do that was like, for kids and so forth. So I didn't see it as much as, a lot of people, like as far as Joe's, you were saying, because he's a little bit, slight bit older.
Just a little bit older.
A little bit older. So he was more cognitive of what Reaganomics was doing at that point. I was seeing it from a street level and then grabbing it in, like through the music, being, how it brought through that perspective. So I don't know if that's totally answering your question.
It does. It does. Actually, I love so much how you all are answering the questions, because it's forcing me to adjust my sociological lens, right? Because I brought up Reagan, and you both went back to the women activists and or educators in your lives and said, yes, Reagan had a role, but we were doing the work to offset some of that political violence. Like you all both went back to like your community-based, and also sounds like women-led, strategies to protect the community, but more importantly, or equally important, to protect the artists, young artists in the community. Like that activism included creating space for young artists to develop their skills and talents. But also, so this makes me think about gender. A lot of the images that we chose were beautifully balanced in terms of gender, right? Malik, and how you capture like, Jessica Care Moore and Mary J. Blige, right? And I'm thinking of Joe, the way that you capture sort of like, everyday Celia Cruz in particular. I'm so glad you said yes, but then also totally unknown, right? To me,
Dawn Penn.
women in the right. Oh, Don Penn too. Excuse me. Hello. These are major. Don Penn, Celia Cruz. Mary J. Blige, Jessica Care Moore, plus Joe, in your work, the everyday women who are just around in community who you're capturing. Also, Malik, I want to publicly state that when we were first in conversation, one of the things that you said is like, yeah, I want to bring in a woman photographer as well. And we searched for that and not necessarily struggled to find it, but just thinking of time constraints. And so what I did was think through images that represented your approach to photographing everyone in the community, right? And so thank you all both for, bringing your personal experiences with the ways that folks were resisting that Reagan moment. And then how it lives in hip hop through its lyrics, right? So Joe is witnessing the beginning of it, and his family is organizing around it. And then Joe, Malik, you're capturing like hip hop's interesting, relationship with drugs and drug culture and the war on drugs that comes out of the Reagan policies, but also what we do beyond the sort of glorification and just thinking about how, we can't oftentimes separate hip hop from the crack and the AIDS epidemic, right? That they are bound up in those things. But photography gives us other stories, right? And other ways of looking through this. One thing that I want to bring into the conversation is technology, right? As a DJ, I move between excitement because of the technology that makes it possible for anyone to become a DJ in 48 hours, right? Like, and just
24 hours.
24 hours. Okay. Somebody is like, I bought the equipment is thinking for me, the equipment is doing the work for me. And so now I'm a DJ, right? Like, and now me and Red Alert are DJs, right? Where it's like, oh, but Red Alert has, hold on, like, right? How are you all experiencing the massively quick evolution of digital photography culture, and how is that informing your own practice, and also photography as a craft in general? Because Malik was referencing an old school, I guess, lens that one uses to look at the contact sheets, and then Joe picked it up and said, here it is. So here we are having this intergenerational conversation in live real time. How is technology affecting you all as photographers? Tell me the challenges and the benefits.
Everything has to evolve. There's growth in everything. I understand that. Okay. But after spending so many years of honing your craft as a photographer, it wasn't as simple when I started photography as pointing and shooting. You had to know mathematics. You had to know your flash is good enough for 6 feet, not 12 feet. Your lens opening, your shutter speed. There's math in play. Is your shutter speed fast enough to freeze this moment? Is your shutter speed slow enough to capture this moment? So when things evolved in terms of digital photography, it took me a long time to transition because I was afraid. It was something new, something different. I was afraid. But in order for me to evolve and grow, I had to take that step into digital photography and be competitive in the field that I love so much. Back in the days, it was about printing up an image and mailing it or bringing it downtown to a publication to get published. Now it's about shooting a digital image and pressing a button, and it's all the way on the other side of the world in seconds, and it's getting published. So it took me a long time. I embrace it. I have a love-hate relationship with digital photography because everybody's a photographer. I could be at an event with my, $3,000 equipment, taking pictures, and somebody with an iPad who needs that instant gratification because they're a blogger and they need to blog now to get it done. The biggest complaint I have today in terms of photography is photographers don't get enough credit as we should. I give the analogy, close your eyes. What do you see? You see nothing. Open your eyes. That's what Malik and I bring to the culture. We bring the visuals. And without the visuals, you can't, the story's only half told, if not even half. So, if I'm shooting an event today, if I can't shoot the way I've always been shooting with total access, I like to call it leave Joe Conzo alone pass, because I'm not going to get in your way. You won't even know I'm shooting your event. That's how meticulous I am. I'm that fly on the wall. Okay, you won't see me on stage. You won't see me, but I will get you some of the best shots you've ever seen because of my 40 plus years of experience. We don't get the respect today because photographers are treated like cattle. First 3 minutes of a song, you're shuffled off to the side. You're not allowed backstage. You're not allowed this. I just hate it. And if I can't shoot the way I want to shoot, I don't shoot. But I embrace technology. I embrace it. It's growth in anything. You know, I'm not walking around calling myself a DJ, even though I got a beautiful vinyl collection and this, that, and the other, but and been around enough DJs that I know what I could be doing. But I'll just leave it at this. If you love something so much, know the history of it. Know the fine points of photography. If you're gonna go into it, don't pick up a digital camera first. Pick up a film camera. Learn the basics of it, and then go into digital.
I love that. And before Malik comes on, I would like to officially make you, Joe, an honorary DJ.
DJ Joe Conzo. DJ Joey Scratch.
DJ Quicklins. DJ Quicklins. No, but just a quick plug for the show, for the exhibition. I say that because I was so moved by how long you have been filming DJs at work, right? So now there's a visual history of DJs who could only spin with vinyl. Thank you for affirming my own sort of challenges with technology, but you are absolutely right, the importance of embracing it. And you're right and vulnerable to talk about openly and honestly the vulnerability, right? And saying that you were afraid, right? That's to kind of impress, like that's wonderful. Malik, what are you thinking?
This is a very interesting conversation. Well, for one, I totally agree with Joe. For me, how I looked at photography and the camera, well, what made me fall in love with photography was the process. You know, that was just, to me, it was magical. You know, when I had this one camera called a Rolleiflex, where you have to look down into it, you know, and it's sort of rectangular, and then it has these two lenses, and it looks totally, you know, steampunk, sci-fi kind of. Like when people look at it, they're looking at like, what the heck is that? And the sort of mystery of it always, you know, I don't know if it was an ego thing or whatever, because, you know, you walked around. That was my gold chain. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's how I walked around with the camera. Like, yeah, people, what the heck is that? You know, but I looked at it as sort of like a magic box. You know, to me, that camera was grabbing moments and angles that will never happen again, and you know, and at an angle that no one else has. You know, when we all experience a moment, none of us experience the moment the same. Even if we're all at the same concert, we won't experience it the same, because why? We're all at different perspectives. So the thing about photography was the fact that I could go and grab this at this perspective, and I don't know what I have until I go and then load it up into the cans and hope that I do the processing right and dank it right, make sure I get no air bubbles and do all that stuff, and then hanging it and then literally looking at the negatives
and watching it dry.
Exactly, watching it dry and trying to see what your shots are, you know, right then and there, right? So and also the fact that, you know, with 120 film, you don't have 30, you know, 36 exposures.
12.
You know, yeah, you got 12 exposures to get your shot, you know, and then that led me on to shooting large format, where it was like, all right, you only, you know, that 4x5 film is expensive, so you better. So it made me start studying the moment and looking at the moment and perspective, you know. So I think now what that's analogous to what AI and all, you know, the new technology is happening now, is not allowing us to think about the process, you know, as much. And so the craft, you know, becomes lost into, you know, into the new algorithm, right? Because now it's more about your end goal as opposed to how you felt about the whole process, how you felt about waiting for those negatives to dry, then cutting them up in the right amount, making sure you don't cut into the negative, you know, and then putting them in the sleeves and then holding them up and then going, all right, do I need to make a contact sheet? No, I think that's the moment. I remember when that happened. And then you go, you know, now you're just going boom, 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 boom. And it's great because you're capturing a lot, and you're able to look at, you know, what you kind of sort of want. So I have a different perspective on, you know, digital technology, but I'm lucky enough to have had the residual original craftsmanship to be able to implement into what, you know, like when we did the show, I had to sit and you know, make sure that the editing was right. I probably wouldn't have gotten the detail of prints that I have gotten for this exhibition if it wasn't for technology, you know. So I have to look at it and weigh the balances of what I'm getting, because I was able to take, you know, if I take, because being in the darkroom was bad for me. You know, being in the darkroom was bad. You know, I was a kid in high school with a dark room in his bedroom.
Smell, the
The
stain.
smell. I look, and Joe, you know, you can't get any light, so you have to block out the windows. So that means your ventilation is done, unless you make a little hole, you know, and then you're like, well, am I going to get any light leaks through that hole? So then you cover up the whole thing, and you got your red light going. And then I literally would, like, I didn't want to waste chemicals, so I literally would just cover my trays, you know, and then go to bed. And my mother would be like, "The heck is wrong with you? You know, you can't sleep in a room with chemicals." You know, but that's how deep I was within the craft, that I was so passionate. And I think that is sort of what's lacking to a certain degree with certain artists. But then, you know, I think the digital realm is now pushing the people who are true craftsmanship to another level, right? So you're going to get a lot more of people who are trying to do something, but I think the people who have the craftsmanship and the thought process will have opportunity to elevate even higher, you know. So like when I first got into it, I was afraid as well. My first approach to digital photography, I was working for a company called Digital Mafia, which is a, you know, a great name, run by Darian Dash. And we used to do CD-ROMs and all that kind of stuff. And so it didn't make sense to shoot it, because what we started doing was shooting it off film and then scanning it in, right? And they were like, dude, this is not gonna work. So they got it. I don't remember what the megapixel for the camera was back then.
Probably two.
It was something ridiculous.
But cost
we
an
wind
arm and a
up-
leg.
Exactly. So we wind up using this digital camera, but it sped up the process, and it cut the budget. So that's the way they went, and then that's the way that everything is going to go now, because AI and technology will allow you to do these things at a minute of the cost, the minute of the time. And so will that be a detriment to us, or will that allow us to free up our minds to be able to go into the next level?
This, I can't even explain to you all that I'm distracted because I'm looking stuff up that you're saying. I just looked up a Rolleiflex camera because I had an idea of what you meant from sort of like silent pictures. I remember seeing that picture box that you look into. Where the hell did you don't have the answer to this, but where the hell
So
did you,
that's where the term came, shooting from the hip, because that camera literally had to be at your hip.
Exactly.
oh,
And you're looking down.
Shoot.
oh
Shoot
my
from the hip.
God. I was thinking, because we were talking about I was thinking of like John Wayne and like Western like notions of masculinity and shooting from the hip, because you have to put like when you're doing a draw. I was in a whole nother world. You see
This
what happened?
is photographer slang.
Hey, but listen, you have helped me unlearn. And to also learn. So I just looked up Rolleiflex. I mean, the terms light leak stood out to me too. Like, God, that's interesting that you have to beware of light leaks. You both answered the question so well, because ultimately you agreed and took us back to two important places, which is process, right? But then also elevation of the craft when you work with the new technology with that knowledge base, right, in mind, that you can also contribute to the ongoing, not just evolution of technology, but to the elevation of craft. So that's awesome. Also, it makes me think about this recent news. You might know the photographer or the situation where someone won some major award and they had to admit that they used AI technology. Does this sound familiar? Um, I thought maybe you all, that it was like in the news in the last few days where this photographer had to admit that he used this AI technology to generate the image. So this was like a massive scandal for right. But that's interesting because the question for me, I was like, oh, was it a confession, or was it like a photographer who was like, yo, that's not possible? Like, who knew? Like, I wonder what happened there. Anyway, I want to bring the conversation to the question of archives, because you two are masters of a visual archive, right? And the question is rooted in the fact that Joe's work, or certainly over 10,000 images are at Cornell, right? And I'm not sure about how long they will be there, if it's indefinite, but I'm just curious too for you, Malik, what are your plans to make sure that your archive, which is now serious pieces of history for people who are violently underrepresented, right? That our own stories, like you all have captured, underrepresented stories, and you have thousands of images. Malik, where will your archive be? Joe, are you going to have archives in other places? How long will it be at Cornell? Is that indefinite? I know that's a big question, but just tell me both about how you think archives.
Real quickly, I'm a person about, this is how I was raised. It's about giving and sharing. I'm also clean and sober over 30-something years, and we have a saying, you can't keep it unless you give it away. So when I was approached by Cornell 10 plus years ago to deposit my negatives there, I structured a deal where at that time I got the biggest check that I ever had in my life. But most importantly, I didn't want my archives to sit in a box in a basement and not be accessible to the masses. And the way we structured it, and shout out to Johan Kugelberg, who, my editor for my book, Born in the Bronx, and my dear, dear friend, we structured a deal where each negative would be digitized and shared and placed online. So to answer your question, my negatives, my archives will be there forever, in perpetuity, which I hate the word perpetuity, but in this format it is good. So when I'm long gone, people can still research my work for years to come. I mean, my negatives sit on the same shelf as the Gettysburg Address. How effing cool is that? I retain ownership for 50 years after I pass away, so my family can still reap the benefits. You mentioned about hip hop's 50th anniversary. I've been so busy licensing my images to this documentary, to that. It's just been a win-win thing. But most importantly, sending people to the Cornell Hip Hop Collection, and it's not only my stuff. It's so many other pioneers' stuff. It'll be preserved for years, for hundreds and hundreds of years. And Cornell's one of the top 10 Ivy League universities in the country. And people ask me, why Cornell? Why not the Bronx Museum? Why not Fordham University? Why not this? Why not that? Nobody wanted it. And that's okay. Because at the end of the day, I can send a 10-year-old kid or a 20-year-old kid who wants to learn about the Bronx, Latin music, hip hop, what was going on in the 70s and 80s, and send them to a website, and he'll spend hours looking at images with the metadata or the information, when the photo was taken, when it was shot, how it was taken. And that to me is priceless. That to me is priceless. When you and I first met, that's exactly where I sent you to. Exactly where I sent you to. And for me, it's the narrative about telling our story and preserving our work. I've heard so many horror stories of John Coltrane's master tapes being put in a dumpster and so and so's archives lost in the fire and this, that, and the other. Yeah, it's just the onus is on us to preserve our history and to tell our story ourselves. And I'm grateful to Cornell for doing that.
Wonderfully said. Wonderfully said.
I don't have anything as wonderful as that, but but
Yes,
no,
yes, you do.
but no, I definitely feel you, Joe, about like when you said nobody else wanted it, because I've approached a lot of people about like, look, I was like, look, documenting our people right now is so important, you know, and I was like, look, you know, and this is before and I'm sorry to say it, the 50-year trend of
Right.
hip hop, because now everything is like, okay, 50 years of hip hop, all right, now everything that you did is good, right? And it's like, nah, it was I you know, I was showing you
Last
this
year
stuff.
was just as good, and the year before.
It was just as, you know, now you want to, you know, so I've approached a lot of people about like, look, you know, I would love to have this stuff archived, and you know, but it's the funding of, you know, scanning, as you guys know, that from the exhibition, scanning and stuff like that can be slightly expensive, you know, especially if you're doing drum scanning. Um, so what I decided to do was I used to own a company in the 90s called Thought Forms Underground, which was a gallery space downtown Manhattan. And it was like a multimedia space. So what I decided to do was to reopen, because we closed in 2000. So we were open during the whole 90s. We closed in 2000. I moved. Anyway, so I decided to reopen that as a multimedia company. And the major part of it was documentation and archiving, but in the whole new processes and the multimedia processes. So my images, you know, I'm doing a project now called the Black Creatives Document, and where I feel that it's really important to photograph and document all our creative components that are, you know, contemporaries that are out here now. You know, just like I was explaining to someone, I was like, well, like how I have Spike Lee, I want to have Ryan Coogler. I want to have whoever is like, you know, the amazing Black filmmakers. Who are the, you know, I got Biggie and Rakim. I want, who is the person that's now, you know, that's above ground and underground, you know. So because it's not just about who are the stars and so forth. To me, it's about who's speaking to you and who touches you and who do you feel need to be documented from this time, you know. And I'm starting my own volume 1, but I'm looking to incorporate other photographers, because obviously I can't photograph all the creative Black, you know, the Black creatives on the planet myself, you know. But I'm doing volume 1 and volume 2. I'm actually looking to be my mother's work, because I'm going to republish her book on Bob Marley and Peter Tosh, and you know, so that work is like, so I have Black creatives document, and then my mother's work, and she was working on another book before she passed on all the musicians that she's photographed, from, like I said, from Kool and the Gang, James Brown, to Roy Ayers, to Max Roach, to you know, Beastie Boys, to you know, LL Cool J, Run DMC. You know, my mom documented these people. So, you know, when I'm still going through all her files now. You know, I was talking to the Peter Tosh family, and they wanted to do something with the, you know, with the works together. So it's very important to do the documentation. Someone just reached out to me about a show that my mother did, you know, on someone who passed away, and they needed a copy of the show. And I felt bad because I haven't had a chance to really dig into the archives like I need to and have everything organized, because it costs money to, you know, time is money and so forth. So, you know, you have to be able to really dig into it. And it's great when you have organizations like Joe does that's helping him to, you know, gather all the negatives, scan them, because it goes hand in hand, you know, because all that time is you losing money to, you know. So when you have an organization that's helping fund that thing, you know, so, you know, anybody's listening, you know, they want to fund my project, you know. But it, you know, who has the images of Bob Marley and Peter Tosh like my mother does, you know,
Wow.
you know, in concert and in person, hanging out,
Wow.
you know. It's like, you know, so it's like, you know, and in that book there's pictures of Stevie Wonder and Roberta
Is that
Flack.
book still available?
It's out of print, right? And it's funny, I think I have it on the shelf here somewhere.
Can we like go to eBay someplace to get it? Because like I want like
the
copies.
the resale has been going for $400 or $500 a book, you know. So and unfortunately, and the
That's
printing
not
wasn't.
enough. Sorry, but that's not enough. But go ahead. I want more because I'm like, what?
But the printing wasn't that great on the book because she self-published it, and that was another thing. She self-published the book, right? She reached out to family and certain people helped get the money to print it and so forth. She had the opening at Danny Simmons' Corridor Gallery, you know, in Brooklyn. Thanks Danny for, you know, for that. You know, I love Danny a lot because he's helped a lot into the arts community. Danny and I in the 90s were the only really Black galleries that were running like they were at the time. He had a Rush Arts Gallery, and we had Thought Forms downtown. And so, you know, it's stuff like that to help the movement keep going and the documentation keep going. And so, yeah, I don't know if that, you know, but documentation is so important. Archives is everything, because without it, you know, like the show, I saw people walking around with their kids going, okay, that's so and so, this is so and so, and this is what they did, and so forth. And even when they got to Biggie, it was like, yeah, you know, they saw he had guns, he lived by the gun, he died by the gun, you know, so forth. Like, it was an educational moment, you know, along with capturing a moment in time. So
it is. I think this is really one of the most important intergenerational conversations I've had, because both of you are offering such rich insight, right? Because on the one hand, Joe is older, the work is older, is being sort of mined and sort of protected, cultivated, preserved by, you know, an institution with tons of resources, right? But then Malik comes along and says and does something that reminds me of a Toni Morrison quote, where she says, if you don't see what you want, create it. Period.
We created the gallery in the 90s because the galleries wasn't accepting us. So we were like, let's do our own.
But see, now you're talking about Malik coming from generations of folks doing your own. Your mother is self-publishing a book that you are now trying to kind of reprint or think with and highlight and preserve and archive, right? Not to mention the whole diasporic, you know, aspect of it with Bob Marley and Tosh, you know, like that's already something. And so for both of you, from Cornell to the creative document that you are working on now, trying to make sure that we know that you know that we were here, Photographers give us the visual evidence that we were here. I mean, we have music, that's fine, but without photographers, we don't have visual proof that we were here. Your work is so critical and important to me. I do also want to say something I want to give a little like nudge to an organization for Malik's work, and that is the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture. Call up Malik, get those archives before another institution, you know, without the same kind of focus, you know, gets access to them, and then they end up being the gatekeepers, right? Unless you negotiate a deal like Joe that says my family after I'm gone will still be leading this project. Come on, that's what I'm saying. Like what you guys are doing from my mind, right, is like amazing. I'm not at all dissing, you know, Cornell and all these other Ivy Leagues that have, you know, Frankie Knuckles' record collection, Joe Conzo's, you know, negatives. Like I get that, and we want the work to be treated well. Toni Morrison's archives are at Princeton. Like I get that. Alice Walker is working with Emory University. Hey, got it. But in the absence of those institutions, created on your own, and it's equally valuable, right? Yep. And so that's super awesome. We are going to end this conversation with an interesting question. I mean, it's in, you know, like some folks might have asked, what does this photography have to do with rhythm, bass, and place? I hope that it is clear that your work represents the interdependent relationship between photographer and music, period, right? Like, I almost feel like I don't know what music sounds like if I can't see it, maybe sometimes, which might be potentially ableist for folks who cannot see. So I do want to make room for other ways of engaging, you know, photography, which there are ways that, like, you know, even like Braille stuff that can like help people see. But then when you think about the relationship between those who cannot see and the music that's created, like Stevie Wonder, right? And like imagination. Okay, I'm going to different places. This is because this is what you all did to me. My mind is like, brrr. So what I will ask you all to end with, just briefly, is the role that music plays in your personal process as photographers. Like an example is that Joe told us within 5 minutes of me meeting Joe, he told me that pretty much when he wakes up, he pushes play. And that music is on for the majority of the day, right? That the music is part of the photography and not just from the perspective of you shooting it, but that you are music. So yeah, what role does music play in your process and your approach to photography, your personal relationship with music? And then we'll end there.
Just real quickly, music is just the fuel. It fuels my body to get up and go through the day. You know, I can spend hours at my computer going through my digital archives or stuff that I shot. I gotta have some music playing. Music is been played in my house as a kid, growing up, as a toddler. My mother was a dancer, so you know, music is life. Music is life. Music, you know, is everything. Is everything. It's air. It's water. It's just fuels me. And I'm grateful that in my photography, a lot of music is part of my photography.
Thank you.
Well, I originally was before I got into photography, my focus was music. So as a photography was a hobby for a while until I realized that I was better at that than I was at music at the time. You know, what's really funny was my original desire was to be a DJ. So that I used to make pause tapes. You know, that's what I would just sit in the crib and just make pause tapes all day. You know, and how I got into pause tapes was Planet Rock came out, right? And I had loved that song so much that I wanted to loop it endlessly throughout a whole cassette, right? So I had to figure out where to stop it and then where to start it again, you know, so that it would be seamless, right? So then I started, like, then I had a friend who was into making beats, and then my man Asen, and we used to just sit and, you know, do pause tapes and stuff like that, and I would watch them do it, and that's how I really started really hanging out in the music scene. It wasn't really for photography; it was because I wanted to make beats, you know. So music for me was everything, because when I was a youngin', my mom had me hanging out in Royer sessions, you know. I never really told a lot of people about this, but the song "We Live in Brooklyn, Baby" was written about my mom and me, by Harry Whitaker, you know, who played for Royers. And so to me, and people can look that up, it's Harry Whitaker. But to me, the relationship of music was always playing in the house. You know, I found out about Alice Coltrane and Pharoah Sanders when I was really young, because my mom was playing Journey into Satchidananda and, you know, various different, you know, like I found out, you know, I got hip to Sade really early, because I was like, oh, okay, this is a different kind of vibe. So music allowed me to have different perspectives, right? To allow me to say, all right, everything is not just hip hop, you know what I'm saying? Because I remember when, you know, I don't feel bad by saying this because Joe's a little older than me, but I remember when disco came out, you know what I mean? I remember, you know, and the changeover from disco into hip hop, you know what I mean? And then how hip hop almost faded a while. I remember like people thought hip hop was dead for a second, you know what I'm saying? Because the club, the club hip hop, you know, the Jungle Brothers and all that stuff, you started fusing in, and all of a sudden that club hop sound, you know, so to me, and that you could see it on my body. You could see how I walked around, how my hair looked, how, you know, so music influenced, you know, how we felt, how we looked at pictures, how, you know, what I was in the whole skate culture, and there was a whole skate thing going on. So I got into Fishbone, you know, and I got into Bad Brains, and I got into, you know, all the different things. So it helped me look at photography in a different way, because I was looking at the skater magazines, you know, Thrasher and all that stuff, and I was like, wow, look at this wide angle lens they shot this thing on. I have a lens like that, you know what I'm saying? I was like, oh, I can start shooting some, you know, and then I started shooting a lot of skater stuff and a lot of, you know, so it definitely implemented, you know, who I became, because, you know, I could feel the music, I can feel the era, you know, and the time through the music, you know, and it helped me really understand, like, you know, and looking back, you know, what, like is the song Three Little Girls? I can't remember what the song is. The culture, Four Little Girls. Yeah, no, it's Three Little Girls. Is the one the girls who got burnt up into a
oh, fire. I thought you were talking about Nina Simone's Four Women, but no, it's four girls who were burned in the Alabama bombing.
It was four. So you know, Coltrane did a song about that, right? But there's no words to the song, right? But you felt deeply what the song was about, you know, and it helped me understand the emotion of the moment. And, you know, so to be able to be so diverse into music allowed me to understand, oh, okay, I can add this to the photographic moment. You know, this makes me feel like that sounds, you know, so be able to be so well versed into different types of music allowed me to look at things from multiple perspectives.
Wow, you all. I could actually talk to you all for hours, but let me end by doing this. The song that you're referencing is John Coltrane's 1963 Alabama, right? This grief-stricken song about what happened in 1963 when those four little girls were in that church. And then you reference Roy Ayers' "We Live in Brooklyn, Baby. We gonna make it, baby.
Brooklyn, baby.
Our time is now," right? And the fact that Diggable Planets samples that song, but then they also sample MC Lyte saying, "Those who live in Brooklyn know just what I'm talking," right? Like, I mean, just the lives that these songs and these experiences have, and that you all are tied to these histories, and you bring in Alice Coltrane, and then we have Alice Coltrane in conversation with Celia Cruz, right? We have like this Afro-Latin, South Bronx, Black Brooklyn, Caribbean, African, Black American, diasporic, visual, sonic, musical, political, socially active culture that you two have been able to capture and witness. And we are lucky. We are lucky. And never before would I have thought about the cousinhood between photographers and DJs. We are cousins. Let me tell you that. Like, I'm hearing it now. I'm like, we are cousins in terms of craft, in terms of witnessing, in terms of observation, in terms of taste making, in terms of sort of being trusted. Because for both of your images, I think more so than DJ. So I mean, imagine the trust that the dance floor offers the DJ, but then when you think about the history of racist camera lenses, right? Like, so that the community must also trust who is capturing them, who is behind the lens. And I think that your images and the intimacy in them communicate to me.
See, Lynnée, real quickly, we're from the community.
Period.
We weren't sent.
And in saying that, Joe, I just want to say that looking at your images, you captured my childhood. As a teenager, I was a b-boy. I was breaking and doing and writing and doing all that stuff. And so looking at your work showed me what brought me into where I was and who I was. You know what I mean? Because the shot of with the story you said, your flash didn't go off, that was me. That dude was me. You know what I mean? So when I saw it, I was like, oh my God, that guy is me. And just like how you can identify with the DJs and so forth, but that whole movement, that whole time, I remember going to the South Bronx and I was like, oh no, I'm not coming back here. I went there for a girl.
I remember going to Brooklyn once because it was so damn far away and so big. So I kept my butt in the Bronx.
Exactly.
Because like, who wanted to get on what is it, Dykeman, like 207th?
Something crazy.
Like going all the way down to Fulton, like that's a lot. Listen, you all, I think that there obviously needs to be some kind of part 2. Oh my God. But if not, we have this archive. We have recorded this history of the two of you in conversation and how I got to witness it and hold space for you two. I am honored. You both are so rich. Do you hear me? You are rich. And so thank you for sharing your wealth with me and for CCCADI and for the folks who trust them, right, for the culture and turn to them for culture. So thank you all so much, Joe, Conzo Jr., Malik Yusef Cumbo. We really appreciate you. Thank